Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So we've been talking about stimulus bills in the United States, and obviously Europe has been waiting for its budget and its stimulus bill. And it appears that Poland and Hungary have now removed their objections, and this can go ahead, some 2.2 trillion euros. What do you make of where we are now in Europe for a stimulus bill, and when can we expect to hear it actually happen?
Well, I think what is positive is that we took enormous decisions on the European level in the last few months, and everything is prepared. Not only the budget, but also the recovery fund. But as you mentioned, there are some debates still open with Hungary and Poland, and I hope that the German presidency will be able to find a solution. Rule of law, freedom of speech, and democracy are extremely important pillars of the EU, and these pillars should not be negotiable.
So that's really interesting. You're really putting down your marker. Those are very, very central to the EU project. What do you make of Poland and Hungary trying to use those as obstructions?
Well, we are unhappy about that, as you can imagine, and it brings us in a difficult situation. But I hope that it will be possible to find a solution and to find a compromise. It's not an easy job for the German presidency, but Angela Merkel is extremely experienced. There's a lot of pressure on Hungary and on Poland, and I hope that there will be a solution in the end.
So you mentioned Chancellor Merkel. I'm sure you yourself and all of your European fellow heads of government are very concerned about Brexit. And as you know, clearly, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is having dinner with the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. What do you think at this point? Do you think there is a deal to be made? Or, as some are saying, it looks like Britain may be headed for a no-deal exit?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to mention that we are extremely unhappy that the UK decided to leave the EU. Our goal was always to avoid a no-deal scenario, to avoid a hard Brexit. And I think all responsible negotiators did an extremely good job, especially Michel Barnier, who was the chief negotiator for the European Union. There are still some open questions, but I think that Ursula von der Leyen and Boris Johnson will be able to solve these last few open issues. And I don't think that UK and Boris Johnson really want a no-deal scenario.
This is what Boris Johnson told Parliament shortly before taking off, before he goes to meet with Madame von der Leyen. He is talking about the level playing field aspect of this deal. Let's just play it.
A good deal is still there to be done, and I look forward to discussing it with Commissioner von der Leyen tonight. But I must tell the House that our friends in the EU are currently insisting that if they pass a new law in the future with which we in this country do not comply or don't follow suit, then they want the automatic right, Mr. Speaker, to punish us and to retaliate.
So, Chancellor, I wonder what you make of that. Essentially, he's saying that he doesn't want the UK to be obliged to follow future EU regulations, especially, essentially what others are doing. Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, they have to accept those regulations in order to have access to the single market. Is what Boris Johnson's saying acceptable?
Well, from our point of view, that's not acceptable. As you can imagine, the level playing field is one of the open issues we still have, and I would say it's probably the most important open issue we still have. So I hope that there will be a solution in the end. I understand the wishes of UK, but I think that our position as European Union is also understandable. And as you mentioned before, the rules are the same for other countries as well, like Norway or Switzerland.
So I want to turn to a summit you're going to be having this week, I think starting tomorrow, on the issue of terrorism in your country, obviously also in France. You're joined up with President Macron to take on terrorism, extremism, And I'm trying to get to the bottom of what it is that you are proposing. From what I gather, you want to create a new criminal offense called political Islam. Can you explain to me what that means exactly and what would be the punishment for it?
Well, I think that there are many areas in the European Union where we should cooperate in the fight against terrorism and radical Islam. It is important that we fight against the structures of ISIS and other terrorist organizations. It is important that we have our borders under control as European Union, that we decide who is allowed to come to the European Union and who is not. And of course, we should also fight the idea behind the terror, the political Islam, the radical ideas. And I'm very happy that this time at the Council meeting, we will have these issues on the agenda. Emmanuel Macron, Austria, some other countries made suggestions, and I hope that we will be able to make decisions on that. Besides that, of course, we also work on necessary steps in Austria. And there I think it is important that we keep foreign terrorist fighters in custody or under electronic surveillance for longer, because all these foreign terrorist fighters who live in the European Union are ticking time bombs. And besides that, I think we have to make it impossible for different groups to mislead our youth, and we have to fight against the ideas of the political Islam.
Last month, you suffered a terrorist attack in which 4 members of your community were killed. A gunman opened fire, and he was then identified as an ISIS sympathizer. We saw the same situation happen in France. We saw a teacher beheaded. We saw then 3 people stabbed in a church, outside a church. One thing I want to ask you, though, is this. Your critics, and also President Macron's critics, are saying that this new idea that you're proposing, to an extent, it's about domestic politics as well. As you know, your Justice Department was criticized for releasing this person early, too early it seems, and that there were warnings about the danger of this particular person which were not heeded. Talk to me about that.
Well, you're absolutely right. There are some open questions, and we have already started an internal investigation in order to find out if mistakes were made and what we can learn. We don't have the results of this investigation yet, but what is already clear for us is that we will have to strengthen our domestic intelligence agency, and that we also must become better in controlling the foreign terrorist fighters in our country. We have about 300 people who left Austria in the past to fight for ISIS in Syria and in Iraq, and many of them returned, and of course all of them are ticking time bombs. They are a threat to our society, and we will try our best to protect our people as well as possible.
So now I want to ask you about how you actually define political Islam, because as you can imagine, it's a massive spectrum. And here you have the president of the Islamic religious community in Austria. This is what he says. There is no definition of political Islam. I would like to invite all people of prudence and reason to consider that we as a society must distinguish between the peaceful religion of Islam and these extremists. So my question to you, Chancellor, is what measures do you put in place to distinguish between the peaceful practitioners and those who you rightly call out, who are terrorists? And particularly, what safeguards you put in place so that your Muslim community does not feel a sense of collective threat or collective punishment?
I think what you said is an extremely important point. After the terrorist attack in Vienna, it was important for me to say that this is not a fight between religious groups. This is not a fight between Christians and Muslims. It's not a fight between Austrians and migrants. it is a fight between all people who believe in our open and free societies and those who want to fight against our societies. And I can assure you that all the measures we take are not directed against a religious group, are not directed against a religion, but against extremism, which undermines our constitution. And I would say this is also the definition of political Islam. It's the idea of undermining our constitution. It's the misuse of a religion.
Can I ask you about, I don't know whether you would agree with me, but some have talked about your own political evolution, perhaps. You know, you used to be in a coalition with the Freedom Party. And we know that this was a far-right party whose first leader was, in fact, a former Nazi and an SS officer and held, you know, pretty despicable views. Now you are in coalition with a completely different party, which is the Green Party, which is a left-wing party. Can you tell me, explain to me what's going on and where you stand between these two polar opposites?
Well, I would say that our position as a party is in the middle. We are a center-right party. And in our system, if you don't have an absolute majority, it is necessary to form coalitions. And I had to work together in a government with the Freedom Party, which worked quite well in many areas. And I now work together with the Green Party, and we also have a good cooperation in most areas. The fight against all forms of anti-Semitism has always been important for me and also for the country and our government.
You've been known to have a very tough anti-immigrant policy. You talked about controlling your borders. And actually, an MEP from the very same Green Party that you are in coalition with said a few years ago about when you closed the borders during that influx a few years ago, and when so many refugees were stuck in Greece, he said, when kids are born and old people die in the mud of Idomeni, that's in Greece, that's the political work of Sebastian Kurz. And these are the guys you're going into coalition with.
Well, it is necessary to build coalitions. Otherwise, our system would not work. And I can assure you that we have a good cooperation with the Green Party, that we are doing our best in order to fight the pandemic together, and that we also try to do necessary reforms in our country. But of course, there are areas like migration where the positions are different. When it comes to the refugee crisis, I would like to also inform you that Austria is among the countries which took the most migrants in the whole European Union, together with Germany and Sweden. There is sometimes the impression that we did not take people in our country, but the truth is that with Sweden and Germany together, we took the most people among the EU member states.
I want to ask you a question about this because it's so interesting. 2 German scientists of Turkish origin have come up with the BioNTech vaccine, the first vaccine that is being injected into people's arms to save pretty much the world from this terrible pandemic. You got to love this immigration story, right?
Yes, of course. And not only Germany, but also Austria are both very diverse countries. We have more than 20% of our population who have a migration background. And in many areas, this, of course, is a success story. But when it comes to illegal migration, I think that this is a question where we have to get better as European Union with our response. It's not the fact that we are against migration, but we want to control it.
And one last question, because it's on COVID and you're imposing new restrictions. Do you think you will have your ski resorts open for this season? You remember it was ski resorts that were big super spreaders last time around.
You are absolutely right, but I think we have to look at it in detail. Outdoor sports like skiing is not problematic itself. For the cable cars, we have COVID safety plans so that people have to keep distance and wear face masks. Very problematic are après-ski and social gatherings in bars. And that is why this will not be allowed this season. So there will be no après-ski, but skiing itself, from our point of view, will be possible.
All right, no après-ski. Everybody should take note. Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.